The Golden Cage. The morning sun painted Lagos' skyline in shades of amber and gold as Malik Ibrahim stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office. At 35, he had built Afritech Solutions into Nigeria's fastest-growing software company, but today his mind wasn't on business figures or market shares. His dark eyes were fixed on the horizon, troubled by a question that had been haunting him for months. "Sir." His assistant's voice broke through his thoughts. "Your wife called. She wants to know if you'll be home for dinner tonight." Malik turned, managing a small smile. "Tell her I'll be there, Rebecca." "Thank you." As Rebecca left, Malik's thoughts drifted back to Zora, his wife of 3 years. Beautiful, charming Zora, who had walked into his life at a charity gala and swept him off his feet with her dazzling smile and quick wit. On the surface, they had everything: a stunning mansion in Ikoyi, a fleet of luxury cars, vacation homes in 3 countries, and a social circle that included Nigeria's elite. But lately, something felt off. It wasn't anything Zara had done exactly, more like little moments, fleeting expressions he caught when she thought he wasn't looking. The way her smile would drop the instant wealthy guests left their dinner parties. How her voice changed when speaking to their household staff. The subtle dismissiveness in her tone when his mother visited wearing her traditional attire instead of designer clothes. Malik walked to his desk and picked up a framed photo, himself and Zora on their wedding day. She looked radiant in her white gown, her dark skin glowing, her smile bright enough to light up Lagos. But now he wondered if that smile had been genuine or just another perfect pose for the cameras. His phone buzzed, a message from his father, Babajid Ibrahim. "Son, come see me today. We need to talk." Malik felt a wave of relief. If anyone could help him make sense of his doubts, it would be Baba. Despite being one of Nigeria's most respected business consultants, Babajid had never lost touch with his humble beginnings. He still lived in the modest family home in Suralere where Malik had grown up, refusing his son's offers to move to a more upscale neighborhood. That afternoon, Malik drove his Mercedes through Lagos's busy streets to his childhood home. The sight of the familiar blue gate and the old mango tree in the front yard always brought him peace. His father was waiting in the small garden, tending to his beloved roses. "Oh, my son." Babajid embraced Malik warmly. At 65, he was still strong and straight-backed, his grey hair the only sign of his age. "Come, sit with your old father." They sat on the wooden bench under the mango tree, its leaves providing shade from the afternoon sun. For a moment, neither spoke, listening to the distant sounds of children playing in the street and women calling out to each other in Yoruba. "Something troubles you, Malik," Babajid finally said. It wasn't a question. Malik sighed, running a hand over his face. "Baba, how did you know when Mama was the right one? How were you sure her love was real?" Babajid's eyes softened. "Oh, this is about Sarah." "Yes." Malik stood up, pacing the small garden. "Everything looks perfect on the surface. She's beautiful, sophisticated, knows exactly what to say and do in our social circle. But lately, I've been noticing things." He told his father about the subtle changes in Zora's behavior, how she had recently fired their longtime cook, Auntie Grace, for serving dinner 5 minutes late. How she had mocked their gardener's accent when she thought no one was listening. How she had become increasingly obsessed with status symbols and social climbing. "Last week," Malik continued, "I overheard her on the phone with her friend, laughing about how she'd finally made it by marrying into money. She didn't know I was home early." His voice cracked slightly. "Baba, what if our whole marriage is built on a lie? What if she never loved me at all?" Babajid was quiet for a long moment, his weathered hands folded in his lap. "My son, when I married your mother, we had nothing but love and hope. We lived in one room, shared a bathroom with 3 other families. Your mother never complained. When I would come home discouraged after another failed business attempt, she would make me laugh, give me strength to try again. He stood up, placing his hands on Malik's shoulders. The true measure of a person isn't how they act when they're rich and comfortable. It's how they treat those they think can't benefit them. How they speak to the security guard, the cleaner, the market woman. But how can I know for sure? Malik asked, his voice heavy with doubt. A thoughtful look crossed Babajit's face. Perhaps, we could find out. What do you mean, Baba? What if I came to work at your house? As a security guard? Malik stared at his father in shock. Baba, you can't be serious. You're Babajit Ibrahim, one of the most respected consultants in Lagos. Babajit chuckled. And who would recognize me? I haven't been in the society papers like you, my son. With some old clothes and a humble demeanor, I would just be another elderly security man. I could see how Zara truly behaves when she thinks no one important is watching. But Baba, it would be hard work, standing in the sun all day. I grew up on a farm, remember? Standing in the sun doesn't scare me. Babajit's eyes twinkled. Besides, I'm curious to see this daughter-in-law of mine when she's not trying to impress me. Malik sat back down heavily on the bench. The idea seemed crazy, yet. You would really do this for me, Baba? For you, my son, I would do anything. Babajit sat beside him. But remember, if we do this, you must treat me like any other security guard. No special treatment. And you must be prepared for whatever truth we uncover. Malik nodded slowly. When would you start? Give me a few days to prepare. Tell your head of security to expect a new guard next week, Baba Karim. That would be my name. As the sun began to set, painting the garden in deep orange hues, father and son sat in companionable silence, both contemplating the path ahead. Malik felt a mix of gratitude and apprehension. His father's willingness to go to such lengths to help him touched his heart deeply, but he also feared what truths might be revealed. Later that night, as Malik drove back to his mansion in Ikoyi, his mind was racing. He found Zora in their elaborate living room, scrolling through her phone. She looked up as he entered, perfectly made up even at this hour. Darling, you're late, she said, her tone carrying a hint of reproach. I had to eat dinner alone. I'm sorry, Malik replied, studying her face. I was with Baba. Zora's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose slightly. Oh. How is the old man? Still refusing to move out of that tiny house. Something in her tone made Malik's heart twinge, but he kept his voice neutral. He's well. By the way, we're getting a new security guard next week. The head of security hired him today. Another one. Zara sighed dramatically. I hope this one knows how to do his job properly, unlike the last one who kept forgetting to open the gate quickly enough. Malik watched as she returned her attention to her phone, already dismissing the topic of the new staff member as unworthy of her time. 1 week, he thought. In 1 week, they would begin to uncover the truth. In his mind, he could hear his father's voice, the true measure of a person isn't how they act when they are rich and comfortable. It's how they treat those they think can't benefit them. As he headed upstairs to their bedroom, Malik sent up a silent prayer, though he wasn't sure what he was praying for, to be proven wrong about his doubts, or to have the strength to face whatever truth they might discover. The first part of their plan was set in motion. Soon, they would know if the woman he had married was truly the person he thought she was, or if their entire marriage was indeed nothing but a beautiful illusion, a golden cage that housed a truth too painful to face. A Father's Wisdom, Part 2. The following week passed like a dream for Malik. By day, he ran his company with his usual precision, but his mind constantly drifted to the plan he and his father had set in motion. Each evening, He would return home to find Zora absorbed in her social media presence, barely looking up as he entered their massive living room. Early Sunday morning, before the sun had fully risen over Lagos, Babajid Ibrahim stood in front of his modest bathroom mirror, preparing for his transformation. He had spent the week gathering everything he needed: worn-out khaki uniforms from the local second-hand market, scuffed boots that had seen better days, and an old cap that would shield his face from both sun and recognition. As he dressed in the simple uniform, Babajid thought about his own father, who had worked as a night watchman to put him through school. "Look at me now, Papa," he whispered to his reflection. "Becoming a security guard by choice, to protect my son's heart." The sound of a car pulling up outside broke his reverie. Malik had arrived to drive him to his new workplace. Babajid picked up his small bag containing a few changes of clothes and basic necessities. He would be living in the security quarters at Malik's mansion, just like any other guard would. "Are you sure about this, Baba?" Malik asked as they drove through the quiet Sunday morning streets. "It's not too late to change your mind." Babajid smiled, patting his son's arm. "My boy, sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we need most. Besides, I've already memorized my new identity." He pulled out a worn ID card they had created. "I am now Baba Karim, aged 65, from a small village in Kwara State. 20 years experience as a security guard in various homes." Malik couldn't help but admire his father's attention to detail. "And you remember the plan? The head of security knows to expect you, but no one else knows who you really are." "Yes, and you must treat me like any other staff member," Babajid reminded him. "No special treatment, no private conversations unless absolutely necessary. We can't risk Zora becoming suspicious." They arrived at the mansion just as the sun was casting its first golden rays across the polished gates. The head of security, Mr. Johnson, was waiting for them. He had been briefed about the situation and could be trusted to keep their secret. "Welcome, Baba Karim," Mr. Johnson said loudly, for the benefit of any listening ears. "Let me show you to your quarters and explain your duties." The security quarters were small but clean, with a narrow bed, a chair, and a tiny bathroom. Babajid set down his bag, looking around at what would be his home for the next few weeks. It was a far cry from his comfortable house in Suraleh, but he had known far worse in his younger days. "Your main duty will be manning the gate," Mr. Johnson explained. "Opening and closing it for Madam and her guests, keeping watch, and making sure no unauthorized persons enter the compound. Your shift starts at 6 a.m. and ends at 6 p.m. "Thank you, sir," Babajid replied, already adopting the humble demeanor of Baba Karim. "I will do my best." As Mr. Johnson left, Malik lingered for a moment, concern etched on his face. "Baba. Go now," Babajid said gently. "Your wife will be waking up soon. Remember, from now on, I am just Baba Karim, your security guard." Malik nodded and left, his heart heavy with emotion. Watching his distinguished father transform into a simple security guard for his sake brought tears to his eyes, but he blinked them away quickly. By 7 a.m., Babajid had taken his position at the gate. The morning air was still cool, and the compound was quiet except for the chirping of birds and the distant sound of cars on the main road. He took a moment to observe his surroundings: the perfectly manicured lawn, the imported flowers in their ceramic pots, the gleaming luxury cars in the driveway. Everything spoke of wealth and status. Around 8 a.m., he heard the click of heels on marble. Zara was emerging from the house, dressed in a designer outfit that probably cost more than what a security guard would make in a year. Babajid straightened up, keeping his eyes respectfully lowered as she approached. "You must be the new guard," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone some wealthy people use when addressing those they consider beneath them. "Make sure you open the gate promptly when I return. The last guard was too slow, and I don't have time to wait around." "Yes, madam," Babajid replied softly, moving to open the gate for her gleaming Range Rover. As she drove off, Babajid made his first mental note. The way she hadn't even asked his name, the dismissive tone, the immediate reminder of her predecessor's failure, all these were small but telling signs of character. Throughout the day, Babajid observed everything while appearing to observe nothing. He watched how Zora spoke sharply to the gardener for trimming the roses too short. He noticed how she ignored the housemaid's greeting but put on a bright smile and warm voice when her wealthy friend pulled up in a Mercedes. During his lunch break, sitting in the small security quarters, Babajid wrote in a tiny notebook he kept hidden in his pocket. He had always believed in recording observations. It was what had made him a successful business consultant. Now, those same skills would help him understand his daughter-in-law's true nature. Late that afternoon, Malik returned from work. As protocol demanded, Babajid opened the gate for his son's car, maintaining the proper distance and deference of a security guard. Their eyes met briefly as Malik drove past, and Babajid could see the question in them. But this was not the time for answers. That evening, after his shift ended, Babajid sat on the narrow bed in his quarters, reviewing his notes from the day. He had observed much, but it was too soon to draw conclusions. Character reveals itself over time, through patterns of behavior rather than isolated incidents. A soft knock at his door startled him. It was Mr. Johnson, bringing him dinner from the main house kitchen. "Madam ordered new rules today," he said quietly. "Staff must eat separately from leftovers. No more sharing meals with the house staff." Babajid thanked him and made another note in his book. Such rules spoke volumes about how Zora viewed the household staff, not as human beings to be treated with dignity, but as servants to be kept in their place. As he prepared for bed, Babajid thought about his son in the big house, probably sitting through another quiet dinner with his wife, both of them maintaining the perfect appearance of a successful young couple. How many other marriages in their social circle were like this, he wondered, beautiful on the outside but hollow within. He said his evening prayers, asking for wisdom and strength for the days ahead. This was only the first day of their test, and already he could see that uncovering the full truth might be more painful than his son had imagined. In the main house, Malik lay awake in his luxurious bedroom, listening to Zora's steady breathing beside him. His mind wandered to his father, sleeping on a narrow bed in the security quarters, all for his sake. What had his father observed today? What would tomorrow reveal? The moon cast silver shadows through the window, and somewhere in the distance, a night bird called. The truth, Malik knew, would come in its own time. For now, all they could do was watch, wait, and hope that whatever they discovered, they would have the strength to face it together. Day one of their plan was complete, but this was just the beginning. The real test of character, and the revelations it would bring, lay ahead in the days to come. The transformation. A week into his role as Baba Karim, Babajid had settled into a routine at the Ibrahim mansion. Each morning, he woke before dawn to prepare for his duties, carefully maintaining his disguise. The other staff members had accepted him as just another elderly security guard, sharing their morning tea and quiet conversations before the household stirred to life. On this particular morning, the gardener, Yusuf, approached him with a steaming cup of tea. "Baba Karim, I brought you something to warm your bones," he said kindly. "The morning air is quite chilly today." Babajid accepted the tea gratefully, noting how the staff looked out for each other. It was these small acts of kindness that made their difficult work bearable. As they shared a quiet moment, Yusuf spoke in hushed tones about the household. "Be careful with Madam," he warned. "She's been in a mood since yesterday when her designer bag arrived in the wrong color. 3 staff members have already been scolded this morning." Just then, they heard the distinct sound of Zora's heels on the marble pathway. Yusuf quickly disappeared into the garden, leaving Babajid alone at his post. Zora emerged, talking loudly on her phone. Can you believe they sent me the wrong shade of blue, she was saying, her voice sharp with irritation. Don't they know who I am? I'm Malik Ibrahim's wife, not some common market woman. As she approached the gate, she snapped her fingers at Babajid without even looking at him, expecting immediate action. He moved to open the gate, but his aged hands worked the mechanism slightly slower than she preferred. For heaven's sake, she exclaimed, ending her call. How hard is it to open a simple gate? I knew we shouldn't have hired someone so old for this job. Sorry, madam, Babajid replied softly, keeping his eyes downcast. These old hands sometimes need a moment. Well, my time is valuable, she retorted. I can't waste it waiting for you to remember how to do your job. Make sure it doesn't happen again. As she drove off in her luxury car, Babajid made another entry in his hidden notebook. The way she had spoken about being Malik Ibrahim's wife was telling. Her identity seemed entirely wrapped up in her husband's status rather than her own person. Later that morning, a delivery truck arrived with new furniture for the house. Babajid watched as Zora supervised the delivery, her behavior shifting dramatically when she realized one of the delivery men was from a prominent family she recognized. Oh, aren't you Alhaji Danjuma's son? She asked, her voice suddenly honey-sweet. I had no idea you were involved in the family business. Please, come in for some refreshments after you're done. The contrast between her treatment of the young businessman and the other delivery workers was stark. While she invited him into the house for drinks, she barely acknowledged the existence of his colleagues who were doing the heavy lifting. During his lunch break, Babajid sat in his quarters, reflecting on what he'd observed. His notebook was filling up with similar instances, moments where Zora's true character showed through her carefully maintained facade. He thought about his son, wondering how Malik would feel knowing how his wife behaved when he wasn't around. The afternoon brought new revelations. A group of Zora's friends arrived for lunch, their expensive cars pulling up to the gate one by one. Babajid opened the gate for each of them, observing how Zora transformed into the perfect hostess, all smiles and warm greetings. Through the open windows, he could hear snippets of their conversation. They were discussing another woman in their social circle who had recently lost her husband's fortune in a bad investment. Can you imagine? Zora's voice carried across the garden. She actually had to sell her designer bags. Now she's living in a regular apartment in Suralia. I could never. That's why I make sure Malik's investments are always secure. A woman needs to protect her lifestyle. Her friends laughed, but Babajid felt a heaviness in his heart. There was no mention of love, of partnership, of building a life together, only the preservation of wealth and status. As evening approached, one of the house staff, Mama Joy, came to the gate looking distressed. When Babajid asked what was wrong, she explained that Zora had accused her of stealing a missing bracelet. I've worked in this house for 3 years, Mama Joy said, wiping her eyes. I would never steal. But Madam says if it's not found by tomorrow, she'll call the police. Babajid offered what comfort he could, knowing he had to maintain his cover as Baba Karim. But he made careful notes about the incident, including how Zora had immediately assumed the worst of a loyal staff member. Just before his shift ended, Malik returned home. As usual, Babajid opened the gate with proper deference, but this time he managed to slip a small note into his son's car window, "We need to talk." Midnight. Garden. That night, after the house had fallen quiet, Malik crept down to the garden where his father waited in the shadows. They spoke in whispers, maintaining their caution even in the dark. "How bad is it, Baba?" Malik asked, his voice tense with worry. Babajid sighed heavily. "My son, what I've seen this past week. The way she treats people when she thinks no one important is watching. It's not good." He told Malik about the day's events, the interaction with the delivery workers, the conversation with her friends, the accusation against Mama Joy. With each revelation, he could see his son's shoulders slumping further. But maybe she's just stressed, Malik suggested weakly. Running a big house like this, maintaining our social position. Son, Babajit said gently, stress doesn't make someone cruel to those who are powerless. That comes from something deeper, a flaw in character that no amount of wealth or status can hide. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of truth settling between them. Finally, Malik spoke, his voice barely a whisper. What should I do, Baba? Keep watching, Babajit advised. The truth is still unfolding. But prepare your heart for what we might discover. As they parted ways, Malik back to his grand bedroom and Babajit to his humble quarters, both men felt the growing tension of their situation. They were pulling back the layers of pretense, and what lay beneath was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. In his quarters, Babajit added one final note to his observations for the day: the true test of character is not how we treat our equals or superiors, but how we treat those we perceive as beneath us. Today, Zara failed that test repeatedly. The moon cast long shadows across the compound as the household slept. In the main house, Zara dreamed of social conquest and status symbols, unaware that her carefully constructed world was slowly beginning to unravel. In his small bed, Babajit prayed for strength, for himself, for his son, and for the difficult days ahead. The transformation was well underway, not just of Babajit into Baba Karim, but of their understanding of who Zora truly was. Each day brought new revelations, and each revelation brought them closer to a truth that would change everything. True colors emerge. The incident with the missing bracelet marked a turning point in the household. By the next morning, news had spread among the staff that Mama Joy, despite her years of loyal service, was under suspicion. The atmosphere in the compound was tense as Babajit took his post at the gate, the morning sun already hot on his shoulders. Around mid-morning, a commotion broke out near the main house. Zora's voice carried across the compound, sharp and accusatory. Babajit watched as she confronted Mama Joy in front of the other staff members. Where is my diamond bracelet? Zora demanded, her designer kaftan rustling as she gestured angrily. It was a gift from Malik's business partners. Do you know how much it's worth? Mama Joy stood with dignity despite her trembling hands. Madam, I swear by God, I have not taken anything. I have served this house faithfully for 3 years. Then how did it disappear? Zora's voice rose higher. You were the only one cleaning my room yesterday. From his post, Babajit observed the scene with a heavy heart. He had seen something yesterday that Zora had forgotten. She had been trying on different jewelry while getting ready for her lunch party, and in her haste to greet her guests, she had been careless with her belongings. Just then, another housemaid, young Blessing, stepped forward timidly. Madam, I found this behind your dressing table when I was cleaning this morning. In her outstretched hand lay the missing bracelet. Zora snatched the bracelet, but instead of apologizing to Mama Joy, she turned her anger on Blessing. And why are you only bringing this now? Were you planning to steal it too? No, madam. Blessing's eyes filled with tears. I just found it now when I was doing the morning cleaning. Useless, all of you. Zora snapped, storming back into the house without a word of apology to Mama Joy. Babajit made detailed notes about the incident in his hidden notebook. The way Zora had jumped to accusations, her lack of apology, her quick shift to suspecting another innocent staff member, all spoke volumes about her character. Later that afternoon, Zora's behavior took an even more revealing turn. A well-dressed woman pulled up to the gate in a modest car. Babajit recognized her as Mrs. Adenuga, one of Zora's regular lunch guests who had recently fallen on hard times after her husband's business setback. I'm here to see Zora, Mrs. Adenuga said softly, her once confident demeanor subdued. Babajid called the main house to announce the visitor. Through the intercom, he heard Zara's irritated response, "Tell her I'm not home." "But madam," he said gently, "she can see your car in the driveway." "Then tell her I'm busy." Zara snapped. "I don't have time for people who can't maintain their status. What will others think if they see me associating with someone who had to sell her house?" Babajid had to deliver the message to Mrs. Adenuga, watching as shame and hurt crossed the woman's face. As she drove away, he added another entry to his notebook: "Loyalty in friendship seems to last only as long as wealth and status remain." The day's events weren't over. In the evening, Zara hosted a dinner party for some potential business partners of Malik's. Babajid watched the transformation with growing concern, how she became the perfect hostess, all charm and grace, laughing at their jokes and making them feel important. "My husband couldn't be here tonight," she told them, "but I'm sure we can discuss the preliminary details. After all, I'm quite involved in all his business decisions." Babajid knew this wasn't true. Malik had specifically told these partners he needed time to review their proposal before making any commitments. But here was Zara, potentially undermining her husband's business relationships for the sake of appearing important. As the guests left, Babajid overheard one of them say to another, "She's quite different from what I remember. Success has changed her." No, Babajid thought to himself, success hasn't changed her. It has merely revealed who she always was. That night, during his secret meeting with Malik in the garden, Babajid shared the day's events. He could see the pain in his son's eyes as he described Zara's behavior, the false accusations, the rejection of a friend in need, the manipulation of business relationships. "I found something else," Malik said quietly, pulling out his phone. "She's been transferring large sums of money to a private account. When I asked her about it, she said it was for household expenses, but the amounts don't match up." Babajid nodded slowly. "She's preparing for a future where she might need to stand alone. It's not love that keeps her here, my son." They sat in silence, the weight of truth settling between them. The garden was quiet except for the distant sound of crickets and the soft rustle of leaves in the night breeze. "I've been blind, haven't I, Baba?" Malik finally said, his voice rough with emotion. "Not blind," Babajid replied gently. "Just seeing what you wanted to see. It's a mistake many of us make when we love someone." As they parted ways again, father to his humble quarters, son to his golden cage, both men felt the shifting of their world. The truth was emerging, clear and undeniable, like the moon now rising over Lagos. In his quarters, Babajid added a final note to his day's observations: "Today, mask slipped completely. When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. The next morning would bring new challenges, new revelations. But for now, in the quiet of night, the truth hung heavy in the air: the woman Malik had married was not the woman he thought she was. The question remaining was, what would he do with this knowledge? In the main house, Zara slept peacefully, unaware that her carefully constructed world was crumbling. She didn't know that every harsh word, every cruel action, every manipulation was being recorded, building a case that would eventually force her to face her true reflection. The transformation was complete, not of Babajid into Baba Karim, but of their understanding of Zora. The mask had fallen, and what lay beneath was impossible to ignore. The hidden observer. The plan was set in motion early Monday morning. Malik announced to Zora that he needed to travel to Abuja for an important business meeting that would last several days. "Don't forget to transfer my monthly allowance before you leave," Zora reminded him, barely looking up from her phone. "I'm hosting the charity gala committee next week, and I need to order new decorations." "Of course," Malik replied, studying her face. Once, he had found her beautiful beyond words. Now, he wondered how he had missed the coldness in her eyes. After making a show of leaving with his luggage, Malik doubled back to the compound through a side entrance known only to the security team. His father had prepared a small room next to his quarters, complete with a window that offered a clear view of the main house's entrance. "Remember," Babajid warned as he helped his son settle in, "you must stay hidden. If Zora discovers you here, everything will be ruined." Malik nodded, his heart heavy. "I need to see for myself, Baba. Your notes and observations. I need to witness what you've been telling me." He didn't have to wait long. By mid-morning, the first incident occurred. The new housemaid, Blessing, was carrying a tray of tea to Zora's private sitting room when she stumbled slightly. Nothing was broken, but a few drops of tea spilled onto the marble floor. "You clumsy fool!" Zora's voice rang out. "Do you know how much this marble flooring cost? More than you'll earn in your lifetime." From his hidden vantage point, Malik watched as the young girl trembled, apologizing repeatedly while Zora continued her tirade. "I don't want excuses. Clean it up immediately, and don't let me see you in my sitting room again. Send someone more competent next time." Blessing hurried away, wiping tears from her eyes. Malik felt a surge of shame. This was happening in his house, to people under his protection. The day continued to reveal more of Zora's true nature. Around noon, the gardener's young son came to deliver his father's medical certificate. Yusuf had fallen ill and needed a few days off to recover. "Sick? Again?" Zora scoffed, barely glancing at the certificate. "Tell your father this is his last warning. If he can't handle the work, I'll find someone who can. And don't come through the front entrance next time, use the service gate where you belong." The boy left, clutching the certificate, his small shoulders slumped. Malik remembered Yusuf, who had tended their gardens for 5 years, creating beauty from bare earth, never complaining about the long hours under the hot sun. In the afternoon, Zora's friends arrived for what she called her a charity planning committee meeting. Malik positioned himself near the window where he could hear their conversation. "Ladies, we need to make this gala bigger than last year's," Zora was saying. "I've already told Malik to donate 5 million naira. We need to show everyone that the Ibrahims are the most generous family in Lagos." "But what about the actual charity work?" one woman asked hesitantly. "The orphanage still needs." "Oh, please," Zara interrupted. "The gala is what matters. That's where we make our connections. The orphanage will get whatever is left over." Malik felt sick. The charity gala had been his mother's initiative years ago, genuinely meant to help needy children. Now it had become nothing but a social climbing tool in Zora's hands. Later, he observed a phone conversation that chilled him to the bone. Zora was speaking to someone in hushed tones, but her words carried clearly through the open window. "Yes, I've already moved most of it to the separate account." "No, Malik doesn't suspect anything. Of course I'm being careful. I didn't marry into this family to walk away empty-handed if things go wrong." Malik's hands clenched into fists. His father, who had been watching silently beside him, placed a calming hand on his shoulder. "Patience, my son," Babajid whispered. "Let's see everything before we act." The day's final revelation came during dinner time. Malik watched as Zora ate alone at the massive dining table, speaking rudely to the staff serving her. "This soup is too salty. Who made this?" "Mama Joy. I should have fired her after the bracelet incident. This is what happens when you give these people too many chances." She pushed the bowl away dramatically. "Take it away and bring me something else. And tell Mama Joy her salary will be cut this month for this incompetence." From his hidden position, Malik could see Mama Joy in the kitchen, a woman who had helped raise him after his mother passed away, who had taught him to love traditional Nigerian dishes. Now she stood quietly, absorbing the abuse, her dignity intact despite Zora's cruelty. That night, father and son sat in the small room, processing everything they had witnessed. I brought her into our home, Baba, Malik said, his voice breaking. I gave her power over these good people who have served our family faithfully for years. How could I have been so blind? Love can be blinding, Babajid replied gently. But now your eyes are open. The question is, what will you do with what you've seen? Malik stood up, pacing the small space. I need to see more. I need to understand the full extent of who she really is. Tomorrow is her big charity committee meeting. I want to see how she handles that. Babajid nodded. Then we continue watching. But remember, my son, every day we allow this to continue is another day these innocent people suffer under her authority. As they prepared for another night, Malik on his narrow cot in the hidden room, Babajid in his security quarters, both men felt the weight of their knowledge. The woman in the big house was not just a bad wife, she was someone who used power to hurt those weaker than herself, who saw people as tools for her advancement rather than human beings deserving of dignity. The moon cast shadows through the window, and somewhere in the distance, a night bird called. In the main house, Zara slept peacefully in her luxurious bedroom, unaware that her husband was less than 100 meters away, watching, learning, and coming to terms with the painful truth about the woman he had married. The next day would bring more revelations, more evidence of her true character. But for now, in the quiet of night, father and son held their peace, knowing that soon they would have to decide how to act on everything they had learned. The mask was crumbling, the truth was emerging, and nothing would ever be the same again. Moments of truth. The day of the charity committee meeting dawned bright and hot. From his hidden room, Malik watched as the household staff scurried about, preparing for Zora's guest. The air was tense with anxiety. Everyone knew that on days like this, Zora's temper would be particularly short. Everything must be perfect. Zora's voice carried across the compound as she inspected the preparations. These women are the most influential in Lagos. One mistake, and our reputation is ruined. Babajid, in his role as Baba Karim, stood at his post by the gate, observing as the expensive cars began arriving. Each committee member was dressed more elaborately than the last, dripping with jewelry and designer labels. He noted how Zora transformed for each arrival, her voice becoming honey-sweet, her gestures graceful and welcoming. "Darling, you look absolutely stunning," she gushed as each guest entered. "That new designer bag. Gorgeous." From his observation point, Malik could see into the large living room where the meeting was being held. The contrast between Zora's behavior with her wealthy guests and her treatment of the staff was stark. While laughing with her friends, she would snap her fingers rudely at the housemaids, not even looking at them as she demanded service. The real shock came during the meeting itself. Mrs. Olayinka, one of the older committee members, brought up the actual purpose of their charity gala. "I visited the orphanage last week," Mrs. Olayinka said, her voice concerned. "The children need new beds, and the roof in the east wing is leaking. Perhaps we should allocate more of the gala budget to actual repairs instead of spending so much on decorations." Zora's response was immediate and cold. "Mrs. Olayinka, with all due respect, you don't understand how these things work. The gala needs to be spectacular to attract the right donors. What's the point of helping a few children if we can't maintain our social position? But isn't the point to help as many children as possible?" Mrs. Olayinka persisted. "The point," Zora said sharply, "is to show Lagos society that we are the leading philanthropic family. My husband's reputation depends on it. Now, about the table settings." Malik felt his heart sink. The charity gala had been his late mother's passion project, genuinely aimed at helping orphan children. In Zora's hands, it had become nothing but a social climbing tool. The meeting continued, with Zora dominating every discussion, steering conversations away from actual charitable work and toward appearances and social impact. She detailed how she had already committed large sums of Malik's money without his knowledge, all to ensure the gala would outshine any other social event. During a break in the meeting, another revealing incident occurred. The new housemaid, Blessing, accidentally dropped a tray of glasses near the kitchen. The crash brought Zara running, her face contorted with rage. "You worthless girl," she screamed, all pretense of sophistication forgotten. "Those were crystal glasses. Do you know how much they cost?" "I'm so sorry, madam," Blessing stammered, already on her knees picking up the pieces. "It was an accident." "An accident? Do you think my husband's money grows on trees?" "That's it, you're fired. Pack your things and get out today." The other committee members watched uncomfortably as Blessing ran from the room in tears. One of them, Mrs. Adeyemi, spoke up gently. "Zara, dear, perhaps you're being a bit harsh. Accidents happen." "Harsh?" Zara turned on her, eyes flashing. "These servants need to learn their place. Besides, she's probably stealing from us like all the others. I caught one trying to steal my bracelet just last week." Malik, watching from his hidden position, saw Mrs. Adeyemi's face change, a flash of recognition that perhaps Zara wasn't the refined lady she pretended to be. The day took an even darker turn when Zara received a phone call that she took in the garden, unaware that both Malik and his father could hear every word. "Yes, the transfers are complete." "No, don't worry about Malik, he trusts me completely. Look, I didn't spend 3 years cultivating this marriage to walk away with nothing. Yes, the offshore account is ready. Just make sure everything is in place before I make my move." Malik felt his father's hand on his shoulder, restraining him from rushing out to confront her. "Patience, my son," Babajid whispered. "Let's see everything." As the committee members left one by one, Zara's mask slipped further. She spoke rudely to the security guards, berated the cleaning staff, and made cruel comments about her departing guest. "Did you see Mrs. Olayinka's bag? Probably a fake. She's not as wealthy as she pretends to be. We should consider removing her from the committee." That evening, after Zara had retired to her room, Malik and his father met in their hidden quarters to discuss what they'd witnessed. "I can't believe this, Baba," Malik said, his voice rough with emotion. "She's not just unkind, she's actively planning something. Those transfers she mentioned." "Yes," Babajid agreed gravely. "It seems she's been preparing for a careful exit after securing as much of your wealth as she can." "But why?" Malik asked, though he already knew the answer. "Why marry me if she didn't love me? Some people see marriage as a business transaction, my son. To her, you were never a husband to love, but a target to exploit." As they sat in silence, processing the day's revelations, they heard a commotion from the staff quarters. Blessing was leaving, carrying her small bag of belongings, crying quietly as other staff members tried to comfort her. "I have to stop this," Malik said, standing up. "I can't let her keep hurting people in my name." "Soon," his father assured him. "But we need to be smart about this. She's clearly been planning her own moves carefully. We need to be just as careful in response." Through the window, they could see Zara's bedroom light still on, her silhouette moving about as she prepared for bed, unaware that her carefully constructed world was about to crumble. "Tomorrow," Malik decided. "Tomorrow we'll gather everyone, the staff, the committee members, everyone who needs to know the truth. It's time to end this charade." Babajid nodded slowly. "Yes, my son. Tomorrow we'll reveal everything. But remember, this isn't just about exposing her. It's about making things right with all the people she's hurt along the way." As the compound settled into night silence, father and son continued planning. In the main house, Zara slept peacefully, dreaming of social triumph at her upcoming gala. She didn't know that in less than 24 hours, her true nature would be exposed to everyone who mattered in her carefully curated world. The moon cast long shadows across the compound, and a cool breeze rustled through the trees. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation they had been building toward. Tomorrow, truth would finally triumph over pretense, reality over appearance, justice over exploitation. The mask was about to fall completely, and nothing would ever be the same again. The weight of evidence. The day before the planned confrontation, Malik sat in his hidden room, reviewing his father's notebook. Every page was filled with careful observations, incidents both small and large that painted a clear picture of who Zora truly was. But it was the most recent events that weighed heaviest on his heart. Earlier that morning, he had witnessed something that removed any last doubts. Zara had received a visit from her younger sister, Amora, who had come seeking help. "Please, Zara," Amora had pleaded in the garden, unaware of the hidden observers. "The school fees are due next week. I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate." Desperate? Zara's laugh was cold. "Maybe if you had married well like I did, you wouldn't be in this situation. I can't keep helping you. What would people think if they knew my sister was begging for school fees?" "But you have so much now," Amora said softly. "And they're your nieces. They're your responsibility, not mine. I worked hard to get where I am. I didn't marry Malik for his kind heart, I married him for his position, his wealth. I've earned this lifestyle, and I won't let anyone, not even family, drag me back down." Malik had watched as Amora left in tears, while Zora returned to planning her charity gala as if nothing had happened. The casual cruelty toward her own sister, the open admission about her motivations for marriage, it was all there, naked and ugly in the morning sun. Now, as evening approached, Malik and his father sat in the security quarters, finalizing their plans for the next day. "Are you sure about this timing?" Babajid asked, his weathered face concerned. "The gala committee will all be here tomorrow for the final planning meeting." "That's exactly why it's perfect," Malik replied. "Everyone needs to see the truth, not just about her treatment of staff, but about how she's corrupted mother's charity work, how she's been planning to steal from us, how she's betrayed everyone's trust." Just then, they heard Zara's voice outside, berating another staff member. "How many times do I have to tell you? When my friends visit, you serve the expensive tea set, not these common cups. Are you all completely useless? This is why you never be more than servants." Through the window, they watched as the elderly housekeeper, Mama Chinua, absorbed the verbal abuse with dignity. This woman had served their family for 20 years, had helped raise Malik after his mother's death. "Enough," Malik whispered, his hands clenching into fists. "This has to end." Babajid placed a calming hand on his son's shoulder. "Tell me what you discovered about the money." Malik pulled out his phone, showing his father the banking records he'd obtained. "She's been systematically transferring funds to secret accounts. Small amounts at first, but growing larger. Last week alone, she moved 50 million naira. She's been planning this for months, maybe years. And the charity funds. Worse than we thought. The money that was supposed to go to the orphanage. She's been diverting most of it to pay for the gala. The children have been sleeping on broken beds while she plans to spend millions on flower arrangements. They spend the next hours going through everything they discovered, witness statements from staff members, financial records, recorded conversations, and Babajid's detailed observations. Each piece of evidence revealed another facet of Zora's true character. As night fell, they heard another commotion from the main house. Zara was on the phone, her voice carrying through the open windows. "Everything's on track. Yes, after the gala would be perfect. He'll be devastated, of course, but that's his problem. I've got everything documented to make me look like the victim. Trust me, when I'm done, he'll be lucky if he has anything left. Malik felt a cold anger settle in his chest. This woman had not only betrayed his love but had planned to destroy him completely. Baba, he said quietly, did you ever suspect, when you first suggested this plan, that we would uncover something this dark? Babajid shook his head slowly. I thought we might find a woman who married for money rather than love. I didn't expect to find someone who could smile while planning to destroy not just her husband, but anyone who stood in her path to wealth and power. They worked late into the night, organizing their evidence, planning their approach. They knew Zora wouldn't go down without a fight. She was too clever, too calculating for that. The staff will need to be protected, Malik noted. She'll try to blame them, threaten them. I've already spoken with Mr. Johnson, Babajid assured him. Security will be ready. And I've contacted your lawyer, he'll be here tomorrow with the necessary papers. Around midnight, they heard Zora's voice again, this time speaking to her personal assistant on the phone. Make sure all the press is invited tomorrow. I want everyone to see what a perfect couple we are, what a generous person I am. The photos will be useful later, trust me. She's still plotting, Malik said bitterly. Even now, she's thinking about how to use everything to her advantage. That's why our timing must be perfect, Babajid replied. She needs to be exposed in front of the very people she's been trying to impress. As they finalized their plans, both men felt the weight of what was to come. This wasn't just about exposing a deceitful wife, it was about justice for all the people she had hurt, about protecting the legacy of Malik's mother's charitable work, about setting right all that had gone wrong. In the main house, Zara slept peacefully, dreaming of her triumph at tomorrow's meeting. She had no idea that less than 24 hours from now, her carefully constructed world would shatter completely. The night was alive with the sounds of Lagos, distant traffic, the call of night birds, the rustle of leaves in the warm breeze. In his small bed, Malik lay awake, remembering all the moments when love had blinded him to the truth. Never again, he promised himself. Never again would he allow someone to use his wealth and position to hurt others. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation they had been building toward. Tomorrow, truth would triumph over deception, justice over exploitation, genuine kindness over calculated cruelty. The evidence was overwhelming, the plans were set, and the time for masks was almost over. When the sun rose over Lagos in a few hours, it would herald the beginning of the end for Zora's reign of deception and cruelty. The birthday party. The morning of the final charity committee meeting dawned bright and clear over Lagos. The Ibrahim mansion was alive with activity as staff prepared for what they thought would be another day of Zora's demanding perfection. None of them, except Mr. Johnson, the head of security, knew what was really about to unfold. Zora was in her element, directing preparations with her usual mixture of charm and cruelty. Those flowers are all wrong, she snapped at the gardener. And remember, when the committee arrives, you people should stay out of sight. We don't want them seeing the help. From their hidden positions, Malik and his father watched as the final pieces of their plan fell into place. The lawyer had arrived early, discreetly waiting in a side office. Key committee members had been quietly contacted and asked to arrive ahead of schedule. Even Zora's sister Amora had been summoned, though she didn't know why. Are you ready, my son? Babajid asked softly, still wearing his disguise as Baba Karim. Malik nodded, his face set with determination. More than ready, Baba. It ends today. The committee members began arriving, and Zora greeted each with practiced warmth. Darling, you look fabulous. Come in, come in. We have so much to discuss for the gala. Mrs. Olayinka, who had been briefed about what was to come, watched Zora with new eyes. She saw how the younger woman switched between syrupy sweetness with guests and sharp commands to staff, how her smile never quite reached her eyes. When most of the committee had assembled in the large living room, Zora began her presentation. Ladies, this year's gala will be spectacular. I've arranged for international press coverage, flying in decorators from Dubai. Excuse me, Zara, Mrs. Olayinka interrupted gently. Before we continue, perhaps we should discuss the actual purpose of our charity. The orphanage still needs those repairs. Oh, please, Zara laughed dismissively. We've been through this. The gala is what matters. Who cares about a few broken beds when we can make headlines? Besides, I've already allocated the funds. Yes, you certainly have, a familiar voice spoke from the doorway. But not for the children. Zara froze, her face draining of color as she turned to see Malik standing there, very much not in Abuja as she had believed. Behind him stood his father, no longer in his security guard disguise but dressed in his usual dignified manner. Malik, she stammered. What are you doing here? And Baba Karim. My name, the older man said quietly, is Babajid Ibrahim. And I've spent the last few weeks watching you reveal exactly who you are, Zara. The committee members murmured in surprise as understanding dawned. Zara's eyes darted around the room, calculating, already planning her defense. Darling, she began, her voice honey-sweet. What's going on? Why are you trying to embarrass me in front of everyone? Enough. Malik's voice was firm. No more acts, Zara. We know everything. He gestured, and Mr. Johnson began distributing folders to everyone in the room. These contain bank statements showing how you've been systematically stealing from both our personal accounts and the charity funds. Here are transcripts of your phone conversations planning to leave me penniless after the gala. And here, he paused, his voice heavy with emotion, are statements from our staff documenting your treatment of them. Zara's face transformed, the mask of sophistication dropping completely. You've been spying on me. How dare you? I am your wife. A wife who married me for my money and position, Malik replied calmly. We have that on record too, from your own conversation with your sister yesterday. Amora, who had been quietly sitting in a corner, stood up. Is it true, Zara? You really said those things about me? About my children? Before Zara could respond, the doors opened again. Blessing, the fired housemaid, entered, followed by other staff members who had suffered under Zara's cruelty. Mama Joy, who had been falsely accused of theft. The gardener's son, carrying his father's medical records. One by one, they told their stories. The committee members listened in growing horror as the full extent of Zora's deception and cruelty was revealed. Mrs. Olayinka especially looked stricken as she realized how the charity she had helped found had been corrupted. The orphanage funds, she said quietly. All those children will be taken care of, Malik assured her. My lawyer has already begun proceedings to recover the misappropriated funds. Zora's face had gone from shock to anger to calculation. She straightened, trying one last time to salvage the situation. You can't prove any of this, she said coldly. It's my word against a bunch of servants. And you, she turned to Babajid, pretending to be a security guard. How pathetic. How dare you spy on me in my own home? Your home. Babajid's voice was quiet but firm. No, Zara. This stopped being your home the moment you chose to abuse your position here. Every cruel word, every act of unkindness, every scheme to steal and deceive, we saw it all. A home is built on love and respect, not exploitation and cruelty. The security cameras saw it too, Malik added, nodding to Mr. Johnson, who switched on a large screen. Images began playing, Zara berating staff, making threatening phone calls, gloating about her plans to her friends. The room watched in silence as Zora's true nature was displayed for all to see. Her face went through a series of emotions: denial, anger, calculation, and finally, a cold sort of acceptance. "Fine," she said, her voice hard. "You want the truth?" "Yes, I married you for your money. Yes, I planned to take everything I could. Because that's how the world works, the clever ones take what they can get. And you," she laughed bitterly, "you were so easy to fool with your talk of love and trust." The committee members gasped at her brazen admission. Mrs. Olayinka stood up, her face stern. "I think we've heard enough," she said. "Zora, you are obviously no longer fit to be part of this committee. The charity will be restructured under new leadership." "Get out," Malik said quietly. "The police have been notified about the financial fraud. My lawyer has prepared divorce papers. You have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings, under supervision, and leave." Zora looked around the room, seeing nothing but disgust and disappointment on every face. Her carefully constructed world had crumbled completely. With a final bitter laugh, she turned and walked toward the stairs, her heels clicking on the marble floor. "You regret this," she called over her shoulder. "All of you." But her threats fell flat in the face of united opposition. The staff members stood tall, no longer afraid. The committee members gathered around Malik and his father, expressing their support and sympathy. Amora approached her brother-in-law tearfully. "I'm so sorry, Malik. I should have told you about her true nature years ago, but..." "No apologies needed," he said gently. "We all saw what we wanted to see. The important thing is that the truth is out now." As security escorted Zora to pack her things, Babajid gathered the staff together. "Thank you all for your patience and dignity through this difficult time. Things will be different now." Looking around the room at the relieved faces of the staff, the supportive presence of the committee members, and the quiet strength of his father beside him, Malik felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The golden cage that had trapped them all in Zora's web of deception was finally broken. The morning sun streamed through the windows, touching everything with new light. Outside, Lagos continued its bustling pace, unaware that within these walls, truth had finally triumphed over pretense, justice over exploitation, genuine kindness over calculated cruelty. The mask had fallen completely, and with it, a new chapter could begin. A new dawn. 6 months after Zara's dramatic departure, the Ibrahim mansion had transformed into a very different place. Gone was the atmosphere of fear and tension, replaced by one of warmth and mutual respect. On this particular morning, Malik stood in the garden, watching as the staff went about their duties with easy smiles and relaxed shoulders. Yusuf, the gardener, was teaching his son the art of pruning roses, no longer afraid to bring his child to work. Mama Joy hummed quietly as she prepared breakfast in the kitchen, her position now elevated to household manager. Even Mr. Johnson seemed younger, the burden of keeping secrets lifted from his shoulders. "Good morning, sir," Blessing called out cheerfully as she passed by with fresh linens. After Zara's departure, Malik had immediately rehired her with a raise and an apology. "Good morning, Blessing," he replied warmly. "How is your computer course going?" "Very well, sir. Thank you for sponsoring it." One of Malik's first acts had been to establish an education fund for the staff and their children. It was his way of making amends for the years they had suffered under Zara's regime. The sound of a car approaching drew his attention to the gate. His father's Mercedes pulled up, and Babajid stepped out, no longer needing any disguise. The older man had become a frequent visitor to the mansion, loved and respected by all the staff who had known him as Baba Karim. "Oh, my son," Babajid greeted, embracing Malik. "Ready for the big day?" Today marked an important milestone, the first charity gala since Zara's exposure. Under the new leadership of Mrs. Olayinka and a restructured committee, the event had been completely transformed. The orphanage renovations are complete, Malik reported as they walked through the garden. New beds, repaired roof, upgraded facilities, everything the children needed. We are using the gala to raise funds for their education now. Your mother would be proud, Babajit said softly. This is what she always intended the charity to be. They entered the house, where preparations for the committee meeting were underway. But unlike before, there was no tension in the air, no fear of making mistakes. The staff moved with confidence, knowing they were valued members of the household. Mrs. Olayinka arrived early, accompanied by Amora, who had been invited to join the committee. After Zara's departure, Malik had made sure his former sister-in-law and her children were taken care of, setting up a trust fund for their education. The press release about Zara's crimes has finally died down, Mrs. Olayinka reported as they settled in the living room. People are more interested in the positive changes we're making now. Indeed, the exposure of Zara's financial fraud had created quite a scandal in Lagos society. She had fled to Dubai, but the authorities were building a case against her. The stolen funds had been recovered, with interest, and redirected to their proper purposes. Have you heard from her at all? Amora asked hesitantly. Malik shook his head. No, and I don't expect to. The divorce is final, and she's been legally barred from accessing any of the foundation's resources. As other committee members arrived, the conversation turned to their plans for expanding their charitable work. The focus was no longer on impressing society, but on making a real difference in children's lives. We've identified 3 more orphanages that need help, Mrs. Olayinka explained, spreading out documents on the table. And some of our wealthy members have finally started contributing substantial amounts, now that they see their money being used properly. The meeting proceeded with genuine warmth and purpose. Ideas were shared, plans made, all centered around the true spirit of charity that Malik's mother had originally envisioned. During a break, Malik found himself in his study, looking at old photographs. There was one of his mother at the first charity gala, her face glowing with genuine compassion. Another showed him and Zora on their wedding day. He had kept it as a reminder to look beyond surfaces. Still dwelling on the past, his father's voice came from the doorway. Learning from it, Malik replied. You know, Baba, when you first suggested pretending to be a security guard, I thought it was a crazy idea. But it revealed so much more than just Zora's true nature. Oh. Babajit sat down beside his son. It showed me the real heart of this house, the staff who stayed loyal despite mistreatment, the committee members who genuinely wanted to help others, the strength of family bonds that can't be broken by greed. A knock at the door interrupted them. It was Mama Joy with lunch for both men, warm jollof rice and grilled fish, served with visible pride and care. Made it specially for you both, she said with a warm smile. Just like old times. After she left, Malik turned to his father. That reminds me, I've been thinking about something Mother used to say. About how wealth is a responsibility, not just a privilege. Oh, yes. Your mother was a wise woman. I want to do more, Baba. Beyond the charity gala, beyond helping the staff. I want to use our resources to make real changes in people's lives. Babajit smiled proudly. And what do you have in mind? Malik pulled out some papers from his desk. I've been working on plans for a foundation, not just for charity events, but for education, healthcare, small business loans. Something that could help people build better lives for themselves. Like giving people fishing rods instead of fish. Exactly. And I want you to help me run it, Baba. Your experience, your wisdom, we need both. Before Babajit could respond, they heard excited voices from outside. The staff's children had arrived from school, filling the compound with laughter and life. It was a sound that would have been unthinkable during Zora's time. Standing at the window, father and son watched as the children played in the garden, their joy infectious. The mansion that had once been a golden cage had transformed into a place of hope and possibility. "Look at them," Babajit said softly. "This is real wealth, my son. Not the money in our accounts or the cars in our garage, but the ability to bring happiness to others." Malik nodded, thinking of how far they had come. The painful revelations of the past months had led to this moment of clarity and purpose. Zara's betrayal had taught him valuable lessons about love, trust, and the true meaning of wealth and status. As evening approached, the compound was filled with the warm glow of sunset. Staff members were heading home to their families, calling out cheerful goodnights. Committee members left with plans for real change, not just social advancement. The security guards changed shifts with easy camaraderie, no longer walking on eggshells. In the garden, the roses Yusuf had planted were blooming, not for show or status, but simply for the joy of beauty. The kitchen smelled of Mama Joy's cooking, prepared with love rather than fear of criticism. Even the old mango tree seemed to stand taller, its leaves dancing in the evening breeze. "A new dawn indeed," Babajit said, patting his son's shoulder. "But remember, my son, the true measure of a person isn't in how they handle betrayal, but in how they choose to move forward from it." Malik smiled, feeling peace settle in his heart. The golden cage had been broken, its bars of pretense and cruelty torn down. In its place stood something far more precious, a home built on foundations of truth, respect, and genuine care for others. The sun set over Lagos, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple. In the distance, church bells rang, mixing with the call to evening prayers from nearby mosques. The city was alive with the sound of people heading home to their families, carrying their own dreams and struggles. But here, in this house that had seen both darkness and light, a new story was beginning. Not one of wealth and power, but of purpose and compassion. The mask had fallen, the truth had triumphed, and in its wake, something beautiful had grown.